Welcome to the Journal. We have a lot of ground to cover in this hour, from journalism and media merger mania to politics and race. First, despite the clutter and conglomeration in commercial broadcasting, a new voice occasionally emerges that proves the exception to the rule. The rule is either echo right-wing ideology or bow your knee to the god of objectivity, meaning you simply counter a pound of official propaganda with an ounce of counterspin. Jon Stewart broke this mold with his daily show on Comedy Central, and now MSNBC's Keith Olbermann has done the same for cable news. Olbermann leaves no doubt about what he sees. Here's what Olbermann says about the vice president.
What servant of any of the 42 previous presidents could possibly withhold information of this urgency and this gravity and wind up back at his desk the next morning instead of winding up before a congressional investigation or a criminal one?
And for President Bush, no minced words.
I accuse you, Mr. Bush, of lying this country into war. I accuse you of fabricating in the minds of your own people a false implied link between Saddam Hussein and 9/11.
Rolling Stone calls Keith Olbermann the most honest man in news. Critics accuse him of extended polemics, and National Review calls him shameless. Olbermann shrugs it off. After years of knocking around broadcasting, mainly as a sportscaster, he's found his place and his voice. His nightly countdown on MSNBC is one of the fastest-growing news shows on cable television. To find out more about what's on Keith Olbermann's mind, read his new book, Truth and Consequences. Keith Olbermann, welcome to the Journal.
My pleasure, sir. Good to be here.
One of my closest friends always watched your nightly sportscast, and he remembers to this day, just got a word from him this morning, he remembers your saying about hockey, it's the most boring sport he's ever seen, and you went on to say, nevertheless, here without further comment are the game results for whatever they're worth.
Yes.
But you don't do that with politics. You don't just give the scores. You have some strong things to say about politics.
It became necessary.
Why?
I was sitting on a plane in Los Angeles reading in the August of 2006 about Don Rumsfeld talking to the veterans and talking about how everyone who was in opposition to the Iraq war policy, the so-called war on terror, even to some degree the Bush administration, was the equivalent in his mind to the Nazi appeasers of 1930s, and he went on at length about how, here's the we're doing the Churchillian role, and I thought, sir, I took history classes. Your group is not Churchill, your group is Neville Chamberlain, because Neville Chamberlain minimized and marginalized anybody who disagreed with him. So reading this ridiculous remark and waiting to see somebody respond to it, and no one did. I'm thinking, well, somebody with a platform ought to be talking about this. Somebody with an avenue to respond should be. Oh, yeah, I have a platform.
And we have the commentary you did after that incident. Let me show it to our audience.
Okay.
The man who sees absolutes where all other men see nuances and shades of meaning is either a prophet or a quack. Donald H. Rumsfeld is not a prophet. Dissent and disagreement with government is the life's blood of human freedom, and not merely because it is the first roadblock against the kind of tyranny the men Mr. Rumsfeld likes to think of as his troops still fight this very evening in Iraq.
You were angry.
I was very angry. I was angry for a period of 2 days. After that first commentary, when I didn't know whether it was going to be greeted, I had support from management at MSNBC for that one. I didn't surprise them. I said, look, I want to do this. And they went, yeah, I think you should. I didn't know what the reaction was going to be. I didn't know if I was going to be gunned down as I came out of the building or put in a black car or, or lauded or whatever. People, for the most part, were ecstatic about this, and our ratings went up immediately, and the reaction from management was, can we do one every night? And I said, no, I can't do one every night. I don't want to turn into that either. I don't want to be silent here, but I don't want to turn this into a manufactured thing. They said, well, how about once a week? And I said, no, you're not following me. It has to be organic. When I get angry on the air, it's because I'm angry about that particular subject, and because of the revision of this country that has been done under our noses for the last 7 years against the will of the people. And when something happens that touches into that general anger, combined with the specific anger for the actual event that we're talking about, it swells up, and I feel like, all right, here comes another one.
But here's the anomaly. You worked for General Electric, which is one of the top defense contractors in the world, and you were criticizing the Secretary of Defense. This could have meant billions of dollars to them. Did they come down on you?
Not in the least.
Not the least.
Not in the least. I can imagine circumstances in which they would, but remember one thing. In the 20s, when the decision was made that we should have a broadcast model for television and radio at that point, but essentially laying the groundwork for television even then, of commercial television, sponsored television for the most part. The one advantage to it is the people who own television, commercial television, will do whatever makes them money. And I make GE money. At a time when television money is increasingly scarce, they are delighted by my money. And I don't want to minimize the idea that there is support for the point of view or freedom of speech. But ultimately, they don't have to make those choices as much as they have to make a choice about whether or not they're making money. Fortuitously, I help them do that.
But if you were not making a profit for GE, you would not have this free speech.
I wonder about that in particular under these circumstances. I think to some degree that automatic money is the everything has been changed to money is the first thing in some circumstances now. And I say this because in 2003, I believe ours was the first commercial newscast in the country to suggest that the raid to rescue Jessica Lynch, the injured and kidnapped private in Iraq, was not necessary. Not that it wasn't patriotic, dangerous to the best of the knowledge of the men who effected it, but it didn't turn out to be necessary. There wasn't anybody defending her. It wasn't a hostage situation. Everybody they saw said, she's over there. Simply reading this report out of a Toronto paper, which was the first really to do it.
That's where I read it,
right.
Too. Right.
The right wing crashed down on my masters at MSNBC and NBC. And they came in and they said, okay, look, you don't need to retract. You don't need to change. If the story happens again tomorrow, do it again tomorrow. But just do me a favor. Come on and say something that emphasizes when you did this story, you were not criticizing the troops who actually did the raid. And I said, I wasn't. And they said, well, if you could say that again, that would probably be all we need.
These are your bosses talking.
Right. And I said, well, this would then allow me to tell the story again. And my particular boss said, mm-hmm. And there was a kind of, we're going to shut down this criticism. We're going to answer these people. We're going to give them what they think they want. They've made the wrong request. This, in fact, will give you another opportunity to tell the same story again, and it has gradually escalated where I've had more and more license ever since.